Hey, my name is Seakga Tladi. This is African Disclosure. Welcome to our program for today. So we're going to start out with developments in the Middle East as we have our three conversations today. Our main topic, the big conversation, is in the Middle East. And I'm curious here as to whether Lebanon has become somewhat of a breaking point for United States diplomacy in the region. So this is coming as Iran has linked broader negotiations with Washington to events unfolding in Lebanon. And Israel military operations continue despite de-escalation efforts. So we're going to be looking into what exactly this means for regional stability, the future of diplomacy, and the balance of power in the Middle East. Right here, we're going to be joined by a political analyst, Konya Matonsi, and he's going to be providing his opinion on the relationship between America and Israel and this latest diplomatic row. Then we're going to turn our attention to education, a very important topic in South Africa. We're going to be talking about education and digital inclusion in South Africa. So we're going to be talking about whether rural digital campuses, an interesting idea, these digital campuses that get put in remote villages, whether these can help rebalance opportunity in a country that is still very much divided by educational inequality. We're going to be looking at the work being done by the Good Work Foundation to equip young people in rural communities with digital skills and prepare them for future careers in a rapidly changing economy. Joining us right there is Kate Groch. She is the Chief Executive Officer of the Good Work Foundation. And then finally, we're going to talk very briefly marking the 100-year anniversary of the Kruger National Park. Yes, the Kruger National Park, a few days ago actually, has turned 100 years old, a century of one of the biggest and most important nature parks in Africa, in the whole world. We'll reflect on the Kruger National Park's history, its contribution to conservation, tourism, and economic development. And we're going to be having a conversation around community inclusion as well as it comes to these parks, right? We need to include the communities around the parks in the running of the parks. Right here, we're going to be speaking to JP Lowe. He is the head of communications and spokesperson for South African National Parks. That's our episode for today. 3 conversations. You do want to keep it locked in with us if anything here sounds interesting to you. My name is Seakga Tladi. Let's get it going. All right. Welcome back to our show. I've gotten myself a little bit of water and I am ready to get into our first conversation about these developments in Lebanon. So, for a few months, right? Washington, the United States, has attempted to position itself as a broker, the key broker. I mean, in a lot of ways, the United States has been one of the key aggressors as well. But ever since the ceasefire, really, the United States is trying to sort of position itself like a broker capable of preventing wider regional war involving Israel, Iran, Hezbollah, and some other actors. And one of those actors being the United States as well. One of the great ironies that we're going to be talking about is the idea that the United States is acting like a broker trying to end the war at the same time as being the aggressor, right? But anyway, let's start right there. The United States has tried to position itself as a broker capable of preventing a wider outspread of war, okay? But recent developments in Lebanon are raising very, very big questions about whether the United States can genuinely serve as a mediator when it remains Israel's closest military, diplomatic, and strategic ally. Of course, the answer there is no. The United States has got no way of being fair in that case, right? And this debate intensified after Iran has now signaled that progress in broader negotiations with the United States are going to depend heavily on what happens in Lebanon. So in Tehran, they have warned that continued Israeli attacks, particularly on Lebanese territory, risk undermining diplomatic efforts and really could reshape the balance of power across the region. At the same time, we know that Israel has continued military operations in Lebanon despite American efforts to sort of calm tensions. Iran has responded with threats of retaliations and warnings that regional diplomacy cannot succeed while Lebanese sovereignty remains under attack. So according to reports, Iran is currently reviewing a proposed agreement with the United States aimed at halting the wider conflict between the two countries. But at the same time, Iranian officials have made it clear that any sustainable diplomatic breakthrough has to include the end of hostilities across multiple fronts, including Lebanon. So Iran argues that Israeli military actions are directly undermining the atmosphere necessary for successful negotiations, and this is absolutely true. It seems as though through ceasefires, through negotiations, through whatever diplomatic attempts are made, Israel is adamant at carrying on with its military campaign. Israel is adamant on finding another enemy, labeling that enemy as an enemy for whatever reason. They're very good at making up whatever reasons. Hey, Hezbollah's attacking us, and now we have to bomb Beirut. Israel has not stopped doing that, it seems like, right? And what makes this situation particularly significant is this continued strikes of Israel in southern Lebanon. Even after reports emerged of American mediation efforts designed to prevent escalation, sources in Lebanon still indicate that Israel operations persisted despite discussions around a partial ceasefire agreement intending to reduce tensions between Israel and Hezbollah. These contradictions are becoming increasingly difficult to ignore, right? On the one hand, in a very mediocre manner. I am in no way giving any applause to the American administration's position on this. They've got a terrible position. They started the war in Iran, or they helped to start it. They're blockading Iran's blockade, which doesn't even make sense. This whole war has just been a strategic, diplomatic, political blunder from the United States administration. It's an unpopular war. But they try sometimes to speak the language of diplomacy, of de-escalation, of wanting regional stability. Right? On the other hand, Israel continues military operation with American military backing, with American political protection, with American diplomatic support. And that is not a contradiction that has gone unnoticed in Tehran, right? In fact, there's now reports emerging that the United States President Donald Trump, he's become so frustrated with the Israeli Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu, right? He got on the call with him recently and he called him crazy. So this is reporting that I've read in... I've read this reporting in the Times, right? But it's been reported in several publications as well, that Donald Trump got on the phone with Netanyahu and he said, "You're acting crazy. You'd be in prison if it wasn't for me." That's what Trump is saying to his Israeli counterpart. He expressed anger during this phone call and basically made it known that what Israel is doing is threatening ongoing negotiations with Iran. But despite this frustration, the broader reality remains unchanged. America continues to provide Israel with enormous diplomatic cover, while at the same time presenting itself as a broker of peace, at least with the Lebanon situation. And I guess I'm repeating this a lot now, but really, can a country truly mediate a conflict when it is deeply, deeply invested in one side? How can we view Washington as neutral when it consistently defends Israeli military actions on the international stage? When we try to go to the UN and have some consequences inflicted on Israel, who's the first country with veto power to put up his hands and say no such thing will happen? It's the United States. And the question becomes even more urgent when we consider the threats that have been recently directed at Beirut. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, he warned that attacks could be launched against targets in Beirut's southern suburbs if exchanges with Hezbollah renewed. Israeli leaders argue that, these violations justify military action, and they said that Lebanon's capital could become a battlefield. But this is a bit more than just military signaling, right? This is the possibility of another devastating chapter in a region that has already endured decades of war, occupation, displacement, instability. And for Iran, the message is also very clear. On Iran's side, they say if you continue to attack Beirut as Netanyahu is threatening, this will have direct consequences for the ongoing negotiations. This is why we're talking about this as almost like a breaking point in this whole row. Because we know from the first demands that were made, from the very first ceasefire in the middle of April or in the beginning of April, it was clear that part of Iran's deal was that you leave Lebanon alone. They argue that diplomacy can't function effectively while military escalation continues in Lebanon. But again here, I want to warn Iran. I'm pretty sure Iran is very, very clear on this message. Iran knows this. But Iran has to proceed carefully because history should be teaching the Iranian leaders that negotiations with the Americans and with the Israelis, they don't necessarily guarantee security. This current conflict itself emerged after months of tensions and failed diplomatic efforts. Two times now, they have bombed Iran while Iran thought it was negotiating. So my warning to the leaders in Iran is to approach any negotiations with those people with great, great caution. There's a long history of mistrust and concerns regarding American commitments, especially since it seems like Iran is taking a very stern approach to current proposals because of what it sees as a history of non-compliance and broken trust. There were deals in place. There were deals in place for nuclear enrichment for Iran. Those deals have been broken. So there is this history of broken trust between the two parties. And it raises an uncomfortable reality, right? Anywhere, diplomacy becomes very difficult when, the sides believe that military pressure provides greater leverage than negotiation. And what happens is a very dangerous cycle. Military action causes retaliation, and then retaliation triggers further escalation, right? I hit you, you hit me back, now I want to hit you back harder. And then we bring in some diplomatic initiatives. We start talking about, no, we're making deals or ceasefire. And then military actions undermine those initiatives. And then the cycle starts again. And the whole time, who's paying the price? Ordinary people. When the rich and powerful wage war, it's the poor and powerless who die. It's Lebanese families, it's Iranian families. It's children who have got zero influence over geopolitical strategy. It's communities that just want peace. It's the human consequences that really, really make my blood boil. It's been a while since we've talked about the genocide in Gaza, but I mean, we can never forget that that happened. And we can never stop highlighting it as a genocide when we're thinking about the human consequences that I'm trying to highlight here. It's far, far, far beyond just Lebanon right now. It's years and years of history of displacement, of putting people in open air prisons, of blockading, of blocking aid. The Samud flotilla now, look at what they did to those people who were just trying to go provide aid to Gaza. Look at how they treated those people. It's disgusting. And the whole time, it's at the cost of humans. It's at the cost of neighborhoods that are reduced to rubble. It's at the cost of generations that grow up in environments that are shaped by fear rather than by opportunity. That's the true ugliness of war in general, and this war in particular. So, the following for any nation should be stated and understood clearly: that no one should be allowed to place their own political ambition over the stability of an entire region. No one should be pursuing strategic advantages, whatever that means, because I don't even see what strategic advantages would come from United States fighting with Iran. But no one should be pursuing those greedy causes at the expense of bringing a region closer to catastrophe. I mean, was the international system not supposedly built to prevent this type of endless escalation? But here we are witnessing a world order that is increasingly shaped by military power rather than by international law. International law is not for Israel. International law is not for the United States. International law is for us in their books. International law is designed to punish African leaders and leaders in the global south. In the West, in the global north, international law, it doesn't matter at all. No matter how much their wars affect the rest of us, no matter how much their genocides affect the rest of us, no matter how much these actions that they do that get condemned by almost everybody in excellently worded diplomatic letters or speeches, no matter how much they care about those wars, what ends up happening is that the rest of us are affected. Our energy markets get affected. Our global shipping routes get disrupted. Our oil prices continue to react to developments in the region. The whole world catches a cold because one country chose to sneeze. And the longer the instability persists, the greater the consequences for countries that are far beyond the immediate conflict zones, including countries across Africa that are already grappling with economic pressures. And for African audiences, this matters as well, because Africans understand the cost of foreign intervention. Africa understands the consequences of prolonged conflict. Oh my goodness, we're still fighting with some of that today. We understand the importance of sovereignty, dialogue, and negotiated settlements. At least we should. I mean, it's not the case everywhere. Sometimes you wish you could look some of our African leaders in the face and say, hey, do better. But we should. We should, as Africans, know better. So the question facing us as the world today is whether the major powers have learned those same lessons that we should have learned. Whether they remain trapped by old patterns where military force continues to overshadow diplomacy. So as Lebanon once again finds itself at the center of regional tensions, the credibility of American diplomacy is being tested. And American diplomacy has failed this test. Recently, they've failed this test like never before. So, I mean, here's some questions, and I think we know the answers to them. Can Washington genuinely restrain its closest ally in Israel? I don't think so. Can negotiations survive amid continued military escalation? I don't think so. Is the region moving towards peace or simply preparing itself for the next phase of conflict? I don't think Israel is done bringing conflict everywhere across that region. Those are some of the questions, and for any thinking person, the answers are pretty simple. But the answers are so simple because we know the extent to which that Israeli administration is nefarious and that American administration is nefarious. We know. So as long as they still have a say, I don't think we're moving closer to peace. I think, Iran had better be preparing itself for escalation if it knows what's good for it. If Iran knows what's good for them, they need not to sit back and think that, okay, we're negotiating, we're fine. Not at all. Not while Israel has something to say about it. Now, to help us further unpack these questions, we're going to be joined by a very, very fiery commentator, someone who tells it like he sees it, and he's going to be sharing his opinion, his perspective on the relationship between Israel and the United States. We're going to be exploring why successive American administrations appear willing to align themselves so closely with strategic objectives that come from Israel. And with our guest, we're going to be examining what this means for peace, stability, and the future of power in the Middle East. My guest name is Konya Matonsi, and I'm very happy to bring him onto the show.
Right now, the developments coming from Lebanon and Iran and America and Israel, that whole tension there is very, very tricky. So this ceasefire has always been very, very fragile, even though it has been in effect since the beginning of April. Israel has continued to strike Lebanon and various other places as well. So maybe let's start by contextualizing a little bit. What would you make of the current stance from Iran's side, from Israel's side, from America's side, and from Lebanon's side?
Okay. The funny thing is, Israel is at this war with the idea of wanting to expand and have their dream of having a greater Israel project. But they could not fulfill that without their big brother, America. But you find it strange that when they put the terms and conditions for Iran, Iran is not supposed to support Yemen, Lebanon, Hamas, and Hezbollah in Lebanon. Now, yet America is involved in this conflict in defense of Israel. They don't want Iran to be in this conflict in defense of Lebanon or any other groups that they support, so-called, or should I say resistant groups in that region. Now, that is very hypocritical. But we understand that's how America works because they believe that the world revolves around them. So that is point number one. Point number two, Iran did not start any conflict this time around. It's in the defense mode. But we need to also bear in mind that Iran is a friend or a brother to Lebanon for real. Hence, they supported Hezbollah. America and Israel, the relationship is transactional. America and Israel are just in bed because they want to believe that they have a common enemy. Yet the common enemy is Iran. So the issue that we are faced with right now is that Iran cannot be able to carry on without supporting the brothers that are around them. And hence they resist with these plans that the Americans in the negotiations they put, so don't support this group, don't do this, don't do that. Now, meanwhile, they're doing the exact same thing. We also need to remember that as soon as this so-called Greater Israel project is finished, Israel will have an issue if America is trying to dictate terms and conditions on how they should run that project. Because even right now, they're bombing Lebanon. They all went to the US without Hezbollah, by the way. The government of Lebanon, that happens to be sell out to its own people, went in bed with Israel together with America, so-called mediator. How can America be a mediator in that conflict while it's pumping Israel with money and weapons to bomb Lebanon? So the Lebanese government was stupid enough to go and sit in the table, allowing America to claim that they are mediating. They're not mediating. America and Israel in this conflict is one thing. So they basically went there to sell the soul of innocent Lebanese, because as soon as they come back from Washington, the bombs did not stop. They went all out with so-called ceasefire. Why am I making this point? I'm making this point to be clear that America has no full control of Israel. Israel has a full control of America. The wars that America is fighting right now, it's not their own war, it's Israel's war. But here's the question. Are there any soldiers that are on standby to go on foot in Iran? No. Netanyahu turned around and said, no, this is not our war, it's Americans' war. But he's the one who keeps on inviting America, in fact, forcing America, forcing Trump through blackmail to join that conflict. So this is the situation we are having right now. As far as Lebanon to be weakened, it's because Assad in Syria is no longer there. Iran was able to move the arms through Assad in Syria straight to Lebanon. Israel was very calculative. They removed Assad, placed a person that was wanted there, who was a terrorist, there's a $10 million bounty on his head. He's now dead. But the aim was not really to put that buffoon there. The aim was to close the supply of weapons to Hezbollah and kill the leadership of Hezbollah, weaken Hezbollah. That was coordinated with the Lebanese government that happens to be sympathetic to Israel. Here's the question. As far as Lebanon is concerned, where is the military of Lebanon? Where are they? Because Hezbollah is the one that is defending the people of Lebanon. Where is the military department of Lebanon? We've not heard of them. They've not fired a single shot. Instead, they are the ones that are now banning Hezbollah from defending people of Lebanon. So now you start to understand that the divide and conquer, they divided Syria, they won. They're dividing Lebanon now. It looks like they will win. But Iran has issued a warning statement. Continue if one building collapses in Beirut, there will be more buildings collapsing in Tel Aviv. Hence now, there's this standoff. In the past 2-3 days, the bombings have subsided. But at the same time, it's not only that. America said to Israel, stop bombing Lebanon because we have a ceasefire, But they did not stop. Hence, the Americans went back while they're still talking to Iran. They started bombing Iran as well. So do you think the Americans decided to do that while they're talking? No. Benjamin Netanyahu and Israelis and the Zionist governments or the Zionist bosses are the ones that are pushing for this conflict to continue, because the agenda won't be fulfilled if Iran is on the way. But to provoke and make Iran feel it, you hit Lebanon. As much as Iran will hit Israel so that America can feel, but it's a little bit different. America won't feel as much as Lebanon, as much as Iran will feel for Lebanon. America is very cautious. They understand that they are almost bankrupt. Their stockpile is almost finished. The war that they're fighting, it's not profitable. We have midterms that are coming. It's going to be a problem. The relationship and the lie that were told to the Gulf states, it's no longer relevant. Qatar hosted them. Bahrain hosted them. UAE hosted them. Kuwait hosted them. There was no single defense for those countries. So when you look at that context, now the battle is between America and Israel. That's where this whole thing is happening. Iran is waiting. The biggest mistake that Iran will make is to let their guard down for the third time. The first time, on the 12th day war, they negotiated, they trusted what Americans said, they were bombed. The second time around, they also went through the same thing. The leaders were killed. That's when they started showing the strength, when they went all out. Hence, the war stopped. It did not stop from the American and the Israel side, because they stopped because how Iran was responding. It's not what they expected. So now they were either regrouping, they're either manufacturing, but now also the fact that they cannot get the rare products or the rare minerals from China, they can't make their weapons. And the deal that Trump was actually going there for was to negotiate on the rare minerals, was to also say we're not going to get involved with Taiwan, was also to say help us talk to Iran. But China understood that you, America, you've been on my case. You took down Maduro because I was supporting the economy of Venezuela by buying oil. Thick as it is, I was buying. Now you are attacking Iran. You know that I'm sustaining the economy of Iran. China, again, sustained the economy of Russia. So you look at the China now, is the kingmaker. China took care of Maduro, taking care of Iran. They took care of Russia. Remember, they don't need to go by sea to go to China. They can just drive. They can just build a pipeline that will go there. And the whole idea of the Americans now and Israel to fight, they want to choke the Zone B countries' economy, because once these countries build their own railway track, they move on land, nothing on sea, the pipelines, everything will work smooth. Then the dollar will collapse. The owners of the dollar are the same people who own the government of Israel, who are the Zionists. So the decisions that are being taken by these political heads in the West are not entirely, it's not entirely up to them. The bosses that tell them, of which it's a different story in the East.
Yeah, so you quite rightly bring up some of the tension that has been going on in the past few days. And it has been reported, I think I read it on Time magazine, but it's been reported on various outlets that the president of the United States had a call with President Netanyahu, and he said that Netanyahu is crazy. Netanyahu would be in prison if it wasn't for him. And this is because of Netanyahu threatening the ceasefire that he's got with Iran. So it really does show that it's quite a tense situation, and the United States and Israel might not be as aligned as we think they are.
Yes, they're not, because in many things. If you were to look at that, there are some people in Congress that are not captured by APEC who will come out to talk. Some are talking to Tucker Carlson. The ordinary people of America, they are no longer excited about Israel. Remember, in 1967, Israel bombed a ship that belonged to US. They bombed it. And the president of America at that particular time blamed the people who complained. Completely, he was a Zionist sellout. J.F. Kennedy, he was not happy with the fact that Israel has weapons of mass destruction. Some were saying that the reason why they took him out because he was going to send inspectors to dismantle, those weapons of mass destruction in Israel. So Israel was not so happy. He was the only president who never went to kiss the stone. He did not buy into this idea of one country to be controlled by another country. He was respecting that any country needs to be at their own independence. They must enjoy their sovereignty. They must enjoy it. So he wanted that for the Americans. But the financial and military industrial complex did not allow Kennedy to live long because it was going to be a threat to Israel. So you can tell that a lot of people were killed. A lot of people died. American soldiers that are dying now in this war, they are killed in the name of Israel. Meanwhile, they are Americans because they're getting involved in conflicts that they shouldn't. So there is no way that these two countries are in good terms 10 out of 10. No. They understand it's a mirage of convenience. They understand that, but what everyone is asking, saying America is big. Why they are controlled by some little tiny piece of land that has no borders, that it always has a thirst of expansion. So those questions are there. They are not aligned. Whenever America wants to do something else, Israel will pull one side. And there's no way that everything that they do will be coordinated. No. There are times when Iran, when they wanted to respond and hit Tel Aviv for killing their general, Iran made a call to US to inform them that we are going to hit Israel in response of what we have done. And America said, go ahead. So if they were in the same line, in the same wavelength, they would have been to say, okay, guys, can we talk to them? No, let's do this. No, they're not. Because what is happening in America, especially in the Congress, APEC has bought the members of the Congress. They don't do things because they want to. Look at stupid guys like Ted Cruz. Everything that, whenever he gets to be interviewed, he defends Israel more than he defends America. So you ask yourself that America has been invaded by Israel. America is no longer independent. It's been colonized by Israel. A very tiny 2% of the billionaires are controlling the Congress. And once you get hold of the Congress, then the decisions will come from the Congress and it will favor whatever that you want because you pay them. So the corruption that is happening there is the one that makes the situation to be here. So these two countries don't like each other. Hence, Mossad agents are banned from going to Langley at CIA headquarters because they don't like each other. They don't trust each other. The Mossad will always try to recruit the CIA to work for them, to spy against who? America. But you are told that these are partners. No, there's no such.
Those are some interesting thoughts. I want to maybe touch on the JFK element before we move on quickly, because yes, even though he did sell major weapon systems to Israel, he was trying to get American scientific inspections of their nuclear sites, which was a source of tension. So it seems like there has been some tension between the two for a long time. So maybe I want to think about if, the United States has got its own pressures domestically. This is an unpopular war. they did not succeed in manufacturing consent for this war as they have done with wars before. So
Yes.
if Washington, feeling these pressures, visibly withdraws from these operations in Iran, what gaps does that create in intelligence, logistics, or capabilities for the IDF, which has depended on Washington's support for these attacks in the Middle East?
I won't say it won't happen. America won't withdraw. The deals are deep. Hence, you had the likes of Epstein, who was planted by the Zionist groups who worked for Mossad to ensure that all the leaders, all the influential people of the world are captured by Israel. Now, don't you think that the idea of withdrawing is not there? The idea of withdrawing is there. We have seen the boys in the Navy blocking their toilets, starting fire in all these flight carriers, the aircraft carriers that they use when they want to attack a country. They did everything to try and sabotage. So the boys on the ground, ordinary soldiers, see that what we are doing, we should not be doing. We are just pushing the agenda of somebody. But the issue is, APEC has done a great work in ensuring that members of Congress have switched sides. There's a member of Congress in the US, I just forgot his name. He goes to Congress wearing IDF uniform with the Israel badge, and they normalize it. In some government buildings, there's 2 flags there. They normalize it. It means the infiltration, the termites are eating the wood of America. That's why it's collapsing. That's why now you'll start to see all this back and forth, because the Democratic Party of America will take advantage of that. Meanwhile, their own people also, they are part or the parcel of being bought by APEC. Hence, when you look at how the Americans operate, it's George Bush, it's Ronald Reagan, or it's Nixon. They were at war. It's Reagan, they're at war. It's George Bush Senior, they're at war. Junior, they're at war. Obama, they're at war. Joe Biden, they're at war. Trump, they're at war. Trump second coming, they're at war. So the foreign policy, the military-industrial complex, and the finance and the power, there's one thing that remains in the war. Regardless of who comes in, that has to happen. All the presidents that will come, support for Israel will never deteriorate, because you are coming in as a president. The Electoral College want to know, what is your view on Israel? What are your stance? What is your foreign policy? Is not about Vietnam or Russia. No, your foreign policy, number 1 is Israel. Number 2 is Israel. Number 3 is China, is Russia, it is there. And part of the reason why within their foreign policy, they are looking at the countries that are threatening their survival, the economics, that is China. And when they look at the military muscle, it will be Russia. But they classify Russia, China, Iran in the same, because it's at the threat of their civilization. They want to remain in power because they want to colonize all the banks around the world. They want to remain at the sea as official sea pirates that will attack any country from anywhere.
I wonder what we should be more scared of, right? Because the United States, I call them their genocide partners, their war partners. They are as guilty as Israel. For a lot of these things, they're just as guilty, the American administrations, successive American administrations, mind you.
Yeah.
But on the other level, I also fear, if Israel does not have at least the handcuffs that the United States are able to put on them, if Israel is not at least limited by America trying to play it safe, like we're seeing right now in Iran, with America negotiating with and Iran continuing to bomb Lebanon. So my question is, which situation should I fear more? The situation where US and Iran, their relationship sort of severs, and then Iran is acting unilaterally in the region, or a relationship where the relationship between Israel and America strengthens even further, and they continue to act in this way together, this illegal way.
Yeah. Look, there is no, if that was possible, we would have seen on the 12-day war. If that was possible, there are presidents that resisted the influence, like Obama, for example. He never used to get along with Netanyahu. Hence, he was caught when he had his mic. He didn't know that his mic was still recording. He said he hates Netanyahu and he's a liar. They did not get along very well. Hence, the activities of Israel within that period of Obama were there, but they were not as horrible as they became when the Republicans come. Now, yes, where things are right now, I don't see anybody has a hand in wanting to try and control what Israel is doing. Everything that Israel is doing now, they decide. They did say that no America, no anybody, no ICJ will stop them from what they want to do. There's no international law. It does not exist to them. But the secret is that they know that they bought the Congress. If the Congress, excuse me, if the Congress was not compromised, we would have had a different story. Because they're conscious are talking. Now you have the likes of BBC, the likes of Piers Morgan challenging the government of Israel to say, no, but this is wrong. Because now more and more, due to social media, people are starting to see information. They're not fed CNN, Fox, or whatever the case is. People are starting to see what is actually happening for what it is. So the actual fact and the reality right now is that there is no way right now, currently, anybody can stop Israel in what they're doing. There's no international law for them. Remember, The Hague, there's no police. But there are countries in Europe that says if Netanyahu come here, we'll arrest him. You see. Then the likes of Bolton Johnson says anybody that will arrest Netanyahu will bomb the ICJ buildings. Meanwhile, they started that. They came up with it to silence most Africans, to silence their opposition. Now, the same thing that they created, they can't stand it because now it's coming back to haunt them. So I don't see any country, any law, anybody that will stop Israel with their behavior right now. America, yes, is the big brother to them. I don't think so. I think Israel is the big brother to America because all of them are puppets now. So they don't have a say.
Yeah, it's always so confusing to think about Israel and their intentions, because I don't understand why it's so difficult for them to just be a normal country. Why is it that you must be a theocratic country that is explicitly based on religious or ethnic lines? Why is that so important to them, to the point where they're even willing to kill and plunder to maintain that? And you would think that that is something we have moved beyond a while ago.
remember the financiers, the financial industrial complex, part of the reason why they wanted to flatten Gaza, and they tell you that they will rebuild Gaza, they were going to have golf courses, it's a lie. There's gas fields there. They need money to sustain. So if they have gas fields in Gaza, they have a neighbor like Lebanon that Hezbollah will know that they are the next. Hezbollah will fight back. So neutralize them. They had Syria, where Assad was not going to sit and allow a snake in the house. Assad was going to push back. Saddam, remember, the invasion of Iraq, where Colin Powell took a small thing with dirty water, claiming that it was a chemical. He lied. He was influenced by Netanyahu. Hence, they went and invade Iraq because they were looking for weapons of mass destruction. But when you look at the map, you will understand why Netanyahu wanted Iran to be taken out, Iraq to be taken out. Iran was going to be next. Remember, there were 7 countries that were supposed to be taken out. Now, Iraq has found that there's a secret military base of Israel that has been operating in Iraq. Basically, these guys want to control the whole entire Middle East and do what they want because they want the oil, they want the gas, they want everything so that they can sustain their economy to continue with the war. And I don't think the war will end in Middle East. Hence, we have the likes of Russia. Israel wants Russia to collapse, wants Iran to collapse, wants China to collapse. It's the same bosses that will make decisions in Washington, make decisions in Belgium, in Brussels, in the EU, that want these countries to go. This was not only in the Middle East, it's going to spread. They don't have borders as we speak. They want to continue their influence. Once they gain the influence, they want to start competing economically. The only way for them to compete economically, they have to look at the geographical position where they are. What is it that this land where they are have? They've got gas, they've got and oil. So the highest consumer of oil in the world is the American Navy. So if the American Navy was not attacking countries, they should be directing the oil to elsewhere. But because they want to keep the war machine going, the military-industrial complex want to continue to manufacture the weapons for them to continue with their influence. So this is the whole idea, because they will be uncomfortable with. That is why now they went and recognized the Somaliland. Why? Simply because its geography, where it is, they can set up a base where they can throw weapons to Iran easy. So anything that they do, it's got to do with geography, it's got to do with geopolitics, it's got to do with positioning. That is why they do that. But where is it going? How is it going to end? And why are all the Arabic countries around them quiet? They were captured. The money that these guys, these deals that they have, your oil for food program, your petrodollar, all of that, which banks, all of these Arab guys, they've got villas in Miami, they're buying buildings in the streets of London, they're keeping their money in Switzerland, they're keeping their monies in Citibank, all this stuff. So they know that should they want to go against Israel, hence it's easy for Trump to say all Arabic countries need to be forced to sign the Abraham Accord. What is the Abraham Accord? Abraham Accord is forcing those Gulf states to normalize their relationship with Israel, meaning turn your back against the Palestinians, turn your back against Lebanon, turn your backs against the Syrians. That's the idea. So who is pushing Trump to force people to sign the Abraham Accord? Once we find that out, we'll understand why Israel cannot be controlled by the Americans.
I think that's a good place to end it. I think it's quite clear that This is a relationship that is incredibly deep. The roots in this relationship are very, very deep, and this monster is intertwined. And it's something that we have got to deal with as a global community. But it seems like with the power balances now, we're quite far from being able to deal with it.
Oh, yes.
We'll definitely be having you on again. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mr. Matons.
All right, welcome back to our program. We have just been speaking with Mr. Konya Matonsi, political analyst, international political analyst, someone who calls it like he sees it. And we've just had some discussion on the situation in Lebanon and really what this means for the future of the region. Now I want to move on. I want to bring it all the way back to South Africa. And in South Africa, I want to bring it to education. You see, when we discuss inequality, which we should be discussing a lot in South Africa because we live in a very unequal society, we know this. We can focus on income, employment, and poverty, but behind all of that, there's another divide that is perhaps a little bit more powerful. I don't want to say more powerful. It's probably, these are interlinked problems. I can't say which one is more or less the problem. But one of the big problems behind a lot of the other problems that we have is the divide between those who have access to quality education and digital skills and those who do not, right? So in many parts of South Africa, a child's future is still very heavily influenced by where they are born. And what I mean by this is that if you're a young person growing up in Sandton or the suburbs of Cape Town or affluent parts of Durban or Pretoria or Johannesburg, if you come from the rich areas and come from a rich family, then you have access to high-speed internet, computer labs, well-resourced schools, and a whole range of extracurricular opportunities. You've got chess club and rock climbing and paintball and water polo and all these things to do and a great education system if you're rich. And then, on the other hand, you get millions of young South Africans that live in rural communities that continue to face overcrowded classrooms. They don't have the computer labs. Some of them don't even have fields or swimming pools at their schools. They are in educational environments that struggle to prepare learners for the world that they're going to work in. So then we ask ourselves, will it be possible for us to compete as a country in the fourth industrial revolution and in trying to develop our country and in trying to develop a strong and unified African Union? Are South Africans going to be able to compete in that battle when so many young people remain excluded from the economy even before they enter the workforce? When so many when I say people are excluded from the economy, if you go to a school that can't prepare you for the workforce, then there's no ways, or you're going to be very limited in how you're able to enter that workforce. So you are excluded from the economy. Are we going to be able to compete in that sort of context? It's no. The answer is no. So how do we confront that? Well, the answer might just lie in innovative grassroots initiatives that are attempting to bring world-class digital education directly into rural communities. And one such initiative is the Good Work Foundation. So we're going to be exploring in our show right now whether organizations like the Good Work Foundation can help reshape South Africa's educational landscape and create new pathways to opportunity for thousands of young people. But to understand why this conversation matters, let's first confront the reality of South African education. Let's open up the door. Let's open up the casket and look at the corpse that is South Africa's education system. So we're nearly 3 decades into democracy. And educational inequality remains one of the country's most persistent challenges. There's an article that has been put out by the Development Bank of South Africa. And this article is called Socioeconomic Factors that challenge South Africa's educational system. And this is a great article for a sort of overview of some of the educational problems in South Africa, which include poor infrastructure. So kids not being able to go to a toilet at school, or not even having classrooms or desks to work from. Overworked teachers that have got a classroom of 50, 60 people. A lack of learning material, right? So these are some of the things that the Development Bank of South Africa summarizes. But the big problem for me is the double system, right? So the dual system where there's the rich schools, there's your Jeppe and Parktown boys and Pretoria Boys Eye and all these good semi-private or private schools, okay? St. John's, any of these rich sounding schools, Hilton, wow, great schools. Schools that can compete with any school in the world, okay? We have that in South Africa. We have schools in South Africa that can compete with any school in the world. But the problem is those schools are located in rich communities, which means that they're located in the communities that have got the minority of people in South Africa. The minority is rich in South Africa. The vast majority is poor. And what kind of schools do the poor kids go to? They go to schools that frequently face shortages of infrastructure, teaching resources, of educational support. And this creates a system where the outcomes of education are not determined by how talented you are, or how hardworking you are, or how ambitious you are, but they're determined by your geography and your socio-economic circumstances, which is unfair. True equality has to start with equality of opportunity. And if you can't go to a good school, then you're already starting the race 10 steps behind. I always tell the story of when I was in my first year at university. I made a very, very good friend, and my friend came from a rural community in KwaZulu-Natal. And I had come from Pretoria. I went to a very, very good school in Pretoria. I had grown up going to good schools because of the privileged economic position that my parents happened to find themselves in, right? And with my friend from KZN, he didn't know how to send an email, right? So I was teaching him how to send an email, and this is his first year of university. He needed to communicate with a lecturer. So I taught him, we created a Google account for him, and I taught him some of the etiquettes in sending an email. And he said something profound to me while I was teaching him how to send an email. And he said that I have completed battles that he should have fought long ago, but he's only starting those battles today. And those battles are learning to work with things like computers. A lot of people come to university and they're not computer literate because they didn't have access to computers when they're going to school. A vast majority of people come to university in that context. And they have to do the same assignments. They have to do the same tests. They have to use the computers in the same way that other kids who are computer literate do. But can you see that they're beginning with a disadvantage? And this disadvantage is built into our education system in South Africa. The legacy of apartheid schooling has not completely left us. We still have a sort of quasi-Bantu education system for the poor, and we've got a normal education system for the rich. And we can't have that. Not even coming to some of the other social ills which South Africa has that also add to educational outcomes that aren't so good. So, for example, how can we expect a young girl to do in school when she's leading a household, when she's living in poverty? when she's a victim of gender-based violence. So these other social problems that we tend to face in South Africa bleed into this as well. But the main thing that I want to come back to, the one thing that I'm banging on over and over right now, is the difference in resources. Is the difference where some schools have everything and other schools don't even have textbooks. So as a consequence, this educational inequality, it can translate into economic inequality. Young people who receive quality education are more likely to access higher education, skilled employment, and economic mobility. And then those who don't get good education find themselves trapped in the same cycles of limited opportunity. And then those same people who have limited opportunities are expected to compete in a rapidly changing economy, in a rapidly changing world. We've got things like AI and data analytics and the digital sphere. All of these advanced technologies are transforming industries across the world. The jobs of the future are going to be increasingly dependent on digital literacy, technological confidence, and the ability to adapt, the ability to learn. And unfortunately, many South African learners remain disconnected from those opportunities. This is where the Good Work Foundation enters the picture. They're trying to solve this. They're trying to break this system. They're a non-profit organization, and what they do is they dedicate themselves to trying to bridge the digital divide in rural communities. They're trying to bridge the educational divide in South Africa. So rather than waiting for opportunity to reach rural South Africans, the organization has chosen to bring opportunities directly to those communities. Its mission is very, very ambitious. They want to equip rural people with digital skills, educational support, and future-focused competencies that are necessary to thrive in the modern economy. So what they do is they've got these digital learning campuses that are located in the middle of rural areas, in the middle of the schools, so they can have access to all the schools. And they provide access to technology, digital education, English language training, and career development programs. Importantly, they don't only focus on computers. They focus on people, on helping individuals develop the confidence and capabilities needed to participate in our rapidly changing world. So they train people and they bring people back into the program to train others. They operate primarily around Mpumalanga in the greater Kruger region. We're going to be talking about the Kruger region a little bit more later in the show, so stay tuned in. But they operate there around Hazyview. And what makes their model interesting is, their recognition that rural communities are not isolated from global change, right? In fact, they're increasingly connected to industries such as ecotourism, conservation, hospitality, and digital services. A lot of their graduates end up working in hospitality because of how much the hospitality industry is linked with the rural economy. Remember, people want to come see the stereotypical view of rural Africa, so they like to come and visit rural villages. So that's a tourism opportunity. It's an opportunity to make money from hospitality. But the challenge is ensuring that the locals have the skills required to participate in these opportunities. And what this foundation does is they believe that the digital education that they provide can help to achieve exactly that. And the results they're getting are already beginning to tell an encouraging story. So over the years that they've been working, they've impacted tens of thousands of learners through various programs. Its digital learning campuses have provided educational support to school learners, to unemployed youth. Some of them have been connected with universities through this foundation. Adults who are looking for new opportunities also have access to them. People became digitally literate. Thousands of young people have become digitally literate. The English language programs have helped as well, designed to improve education and employment outcomes. And they've also worked directly with teachers, helping to strengthen educational capacity within rural schools themselves. And this is an important point, right? Because sustainable education, sustainable change in our education system cannot happen by focusing only on learners. Our teachers are a big part of this as well. They must be supported. Schools must be strengthened. And communities need to become active participants in the educational transformation that we're trying to see. We need parents attending school events. It's not only about technology, it's about creating an ecosystem. And you'll hear more about the systemic thinking as we get into our interview with the CEO of the Good Work Foundation. That is the important work that is being done. That is the important work that is being done to empower young learners in rural communities. Because good education and being able to participate in the changing world of work, that should not be something that is reserved exclusively for urban elites. Rural communities should also be active participants in shaping South Africa's digital future. Young people in Bushbuckridge or wherever, they deserve access to the same opportunities that are available elsewhere because they have talent. Talent exists everywhere, but opportunity does not. And hopefully, this can be the beginning of bringing opportunity to them. I am now going to be joined by Kate Groch. Kate Groch is the CEO of the Good Work Foundation, and we managed to have a conversation with her about some of the work that they do. So please help me welcome her onto the show.
I wanted to bring you on today to talk about some of the work that the Good Work Foundation is doing. You are the CEO of the Good Work Foundation on rural digital campuses, and I wanted to talk to you about these rural digital campuses and rebalancing the map of South Africa's opportunities. So, firstly, my first question is, can you talk to me a little bit about the structure of Good Work Foundation? Is it a NPC, NPO, and yeah, just that foundational bit first.
Sure. No, 100%. Thank you for having me. We're excited to be here. The Good Work Foundation is an education nonprofit. Its mission is to create opportunities, and we very early on decided to move to the rural parts of South Africa. So it has as its vision to reimagine what we learn, how we learn, and most importantly, who has access to that learning. And sort of that's the sort of thread that runs through everything that we do. And we do that by creating digital campuses in rural parts of South Africa, which unlocks both the opportunity for learning, but then also what we've seen is as you unlock that opportunity, you unlock opportunity for work, you unlock opportunity for careers, and we see opportunities now for our young people in these areas.
Yeah, because a lot of the problems are interlinked. Like an education problem becomes an employment problem, becomes a poverty problem, and
100%.
it's cyclical like that. So you're addressing this using what you call these digital campuses. What is a digital campus? Talk to me a little bit about what exactly that means.
So a digital campus, what we did is we sort of took almost aerial views of the areas we're in and placed ourselves in the middle of a number of schools. So we started off, we have a digital campus which has the Wi-Fi, the connectivity, the facilitators, the courses that are available. And what it allows is a whole number of schools to connect in. So instead of going to one computer center per school, we've gone to look and see, can we put ourselves in the middle and allow a number of schools? So our one campus in Hazyview actually has 10 schools that are tapped into it. And then we have satellite campuses, which are even more rural. And those have up to 5 or 7 schools that are tapped in. So what we've managed to do is to get to a number of, we had about 16,500 children that are in our programs. And we can do that because we've done it centrally. And then alongside the children's program, we have a bridging year for young adults who've left school and are not maybe sure exactly what's next. And from there, after that course, our young people are moving either into further studies. So we have a team that gets them connected into universities, or into our own career academies in hospitality, conservation, and IT. And then, or to sort of support them as they come up with entrepreneurial ideas in that region, because the young people of those regions are the best to solve the problems of those regions if given the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, you're casting quite a wide net in terms of the
Yeah.
goals, being able to help people in so many different ways. I'm curious, what are some of the outcomes of those programs when they do happen? So, what is the pattern with people who are going into the bridging program? What is the pattern with people who are entering your employment avenues, the university students? Is there any feedback you can share in that regard?
Absolutely. And I think, what we've started to create, I think when we look at GW, if you take one view up, we've actually started to become a network for these young people. The biggest challenge young people have is they don't have the network that gets them into university or maybe gets them their first job. We all have somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody, so that's how you sort of get your foot in the door. And so I think GWF, by creating this digital campus, and sort of unlocking the talent, really, or showcasing the talent. The talent's already there. All we get to do is showcase it. Have started to become the network for these young people. And I mean, we have countless stories we have a lot of, I think it's about 80% of Good Work Foundation staff are young people through our program. So they're running the campuses now and doing all that. But we've had young people start careers in IT. If you go into any of the hotels or lodges around here, there are a lot of GWF graduates. And I think it's about creating opportunity for young people to connect into not just the job. We want to move away from people just holding on to a job forever and ever, but starting careers and starting sort of exciting careers for themselves, but that also allow you to stay home and then impact both your family, the community around you, and then this region. And I think that's a really exciting sort of, I suppose, impact that we've had. While we started as a learning space, I think what you start to see are the ripples become much wider than that. And they become to do with, yes, opportunities for jobs, but then you start to see a region starting to change, which is what we're very excited about.
Yeah, it does sound incredibly interesting. Now, which local partnerships are already in place? This is maybe with government, with other NGOs, and how do they convert this training into opportunities?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of we've gone out and we said we don't want just donors, we want partners. And I must say we've created some lovely partnerships along the way. And those partnerships, yes, they are funding partnerships. We're a nonprofit, so that is an important part of our partnership. But what we see is if they are local lodges who are now partners with ourselves, if it's sand parks, if it's those sort of places, what we see now is our young people, not only is the funding coming to GWF, but the opportunities for work are happening the other way. And I think that's when it really started to work for us. We have a very good relationship with the Department of Education. We work in, I think it's 41 schools. So, we work side by side. We are supporting the work that they're doing, and allowing sort of young people and the teachers in these rural schools to get the support as the world changes and as technology just goes faster and faster. How do we support that within the school system, both for the learners and definitely for the teachers who have to be the ones who allow for this in their space?
Yeah, and I'm very curious because we know that South Africa is incredibly diverse, and the learners and teachers will be different people in different communities of different languages as well. So, are there any strategies that are in place to make sure equitable access for learners, even with disabilities or non-English speakers as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's the gift of South Africa and the challenge of South Africa is all those different sort of cultures and languages. And it's interesting because that sort of gets mirrored in our campuses, because our campuses are in different villages. Some campuses are predominantly Siswati, some are Sitsonga. And so you actually start to see the differences, even though the core programs are exactly the same. you allow for the culture and for the language of the space. All our subjects and things are done in English because the young people are going to have to connect into a world, and especially in the business world that does English. But there is a great, there is still a lot of reverence and importance given to where the young people are coming from, and I think that's really important. At the moment, we've been based mostly in Mpumalanga, and we have one campus in the Free State. But absolutely, as we move, and that is the plan, as we move to other rural parts of South Africa, I think if you take a successful program from Mpumalanga, you can't just take it and plant it on top of a place. There is a long process that happens before that. And we are busy sort of perfecting that process. We're busy building a new campus now. And there's been a 6 month to 1 year process of getting to know the community, speaking with the elders, speaking with the chiefs, speaking with the teachers, who's the principal, who are the players in that space. And I think if you take the time before we start a project, it's a lot easier to move it across. If you try and be too quick to get going, sometimes you have to fix things later. So what's that wonderful saying? It's like more haste, less speed. If you do it properly in the beginning, it starts to happen. And I think the fact that we are growing talent from wherever we are, and that talent ends up running the campuses, I think starts to mitigate that problem where you have people from other places trying to connect in. So I think there's an opportunity here for young leaders within our system to really start to take this campus to wherever they're from, and I think that's when it will work.
Yeah, you speak about this long and extensive process of getting to know the community before starting any of these projects, and you are working in some rural villages. My question is about, what do you notice about the hunger of young people to engage with learning in places like that?
Yeah, I mean, all we seem to find is the most unbelievable young South Africans. And so, it's about opportunity. I think sometimes there can be skepticism because projects have come and gone in the past. And I think that's something as nonprofits we have to be very thoughtful about. And so we only go somewhere where we know we're going, because there's such an anticipation of opportunity and things that are going to come. And then you don't want to step back and say, oh, sorry, it's not happening. And I think that's part of that long process in the beginning. I think, we live in a country that has challenges. We all know that. And I think that if we start to unlock the young rural South African, at the moment, a lot of the projects happen in the cities, and that's because it's easy to get to, and companies put money, can sponsor those and go and visit. And that's wonderful because there are wonderful programs happening. But I think we need to tap into all the talent, and there is a lot of talent out here, and all that it needs is unlocking. And that's what we're seeing. So I think there is a hunger for opportunity. There is a wonderful sense of community. A lot of young people want to do well, not just for themselves, but for their families and for even their community. And I think that's a wonderful sort of ideology to work with, to know that the work you do has a ripple effect that's long beyond Good Work Foundation. By creating a young person who knows who they want to be and can step into a job, that ripples, they start their own sort of circles of ripples, and that's what really works. So I think that's the key, is to really tap into these young people. They know the challenges better than anyone of where they live. So let's arm them with the skills and the ability to create those solutions for themselves.
Yeah, they do know the challenges of their local experience, but what you find happens a lot of the time is that the individuals who become the most educated and skilled from a rural area will often end up leaving and move to a city. So I quite like that it's a lot of the graduates of your program that end up running the system, because then at least it gets some people who stay there. But how concerned are you about that sort of pattern of the movement of people out after they have received this training, and how important is it to develop rather these rural villages as well?
Exactly. And I think that, that's part of the thing. I mean, GWF did it in the beginning. You find all young, talented young people, you shine them up, give them bursaries, they send off to university and often don't come back. And so I think there's there's a balance. Yes, there's the creating of the opportunity, the learning and all that. And we talk about creating an ecosystem of learning and working. And I think it's important to start to create the things that provide jobs here too, and again, as I said, not just a job, but the beginnings of a career. And I think, the young people, don't necessarily want to go to Joburg. It's expensive to move to Joburg from here, and then you're creating a job there, but then you're still sending money back home. And I think there's a huge opportunity for development. And if we're thoughtful about it, not development that impacts these rural spaces negatively, but using technology. A young person can be working from a village out here with people from across the world now. And I think that's the change that's happened. And I think that's something we're going to see across Africa, is if young people have those skills, there's no reason they can't be at home and working with someone in New York. There's no reason anymore. And so we don't have to move to the place anymore. And that's exciting. And it's also about, making the change of, there's been the economy of wildlife specifically in South Africa, the hotels and lodges has been extremely successful in this country, but it's also sometimes creates beneficiaries, clinics get built and preschools get built. And I think it's time for the young people that border these areas to actually start to participate in that economy and actually be the ones who get the jobs in that economy. And I think we've seen that with our partners. A lot of our partners are, taking the graduates. And yes, sometimes it takes a bit of time to grow them, but we've got young people running camps. You bump into them at restaurants, you bump into them all over Hazyview, which is wonderful. But yeah, I think it is really, really important that we can't just teach in isolation, because then all we're really doing is postponing the inevitable. We've got to start to look at what else can we do in this region as a player, partnering with other nonprofits, people who support entrepreneurship, the partners who are running lodges, and how do we make sure that as a network together, we create the opportunities for these young people to move forward. And yeah, and it seems to be something that people are open to doing. The young people they grab it with two hands, and it's amazing to see how quickly someone moves within a system when you are excited and have the skills and have the energy. And so, yeah, I think it's just more and more of that needs to happen. So hopefully we get to do more.
Yeah, hopefully indeed, because, we hear about the scary unemployment rates in South Africa, particularly for young people. And it's very easy to say that, maybe young people don't want to work, or to blame young people's apathy. But I do think young people are very hungry for opportunity. They're hungry for any platform, and they do grab it with both hands. And I think this proves that in some ways.
Yeah. 100%. I think there is sometimes that I think that young people get a bad rap. The young people I meet, or that we meet on our campuses every day, there's nobody who's entitled. There's nobody who's waiting for somebody else to fix it. These are all young people who are stepping up, working hard, seeing an opportunity, learning, and then figuring out how can they turn that learning now into a career, and how to benefit their family and the people around them. And I think, that's the South Africa I like to live in. And so, these young people prove every day that's the reason South Africa ends up working through all its trials and tribulations, is because of this, the people on the ground who are putting their hands up and working hard. That's what's happening. Yeah.
And now, we've established how important some of this work is, and you've told me about how many people it's helped already. But my question is, how do you make sure that you stay sustainable in terms of being able to be more than the projects that come and go? How does the Good Work Foundation make sure that it's able to be a sustainable change, that once it comes to a place, it becomes an institution, a long-lasting one?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really, and it goes to planning, and it goes to the lessons learned, and we've learned lessons along the way. Some of them were harder than others, but I think, it's really important that we are, we seem to be, the roots are deep where we are. And I think, young people, as a campus starts to be run by young people from there, or that we've trained up, then you can only start to look at other places. People are very quick when you get something that you see is working to go and put it all over the place. And I think it's really important to make sure that the roots are deep. You really know what you're doing before you start to move it across the country. But I think, we're getting to that point. worked really hard at the partnerships, the funding partnerships. That's the one thing as a nonprofit that is hard. That we came through the early 2020s and through, I think, is testament to how hard the team works. I think as we move forward, we're starting to look at what kind of jobs and what kind of companies, what kind of enterprises can be developed around our campuses. So there's a move away from being just Good Work Foundation. We have a nonprofit now called Village Up, whose mission is to take equity in or create businesses that young people can either work in. But hopefully that starts to be a source of funding for GWF as we move forward. So I think as nonprofits, there's a big push for nonprofits to be worked much more as businesses than as in the olden days, just charities. I think we have to look at, yes, our firm focus is the education and opportunities for young people, but you can't just do that in isolation. You've got to find, again, it goes back to this ecosystem and this network. That's what we have to be. Because if you're in isolation, that's when things come and go. I think the more you can connect in with others, the more you can work with others, that's when it starts to work. And that's what we're seeing as being successful.
And then what is the role of the wider communities that you end up engaging with, and particularly their community leadership structures? And I mean, you've already spoken about the process that you take in terms of before establishing a center, but I want to know about your continued relationship with the community in the area, the elders and everyone else.
Yeah, I think, a lot of our young people start to play leadership roles within the community anyway. So we have that, but we have community committees at all our campuses. So we have representatives from the communities of all sort of levels and all sort of, I suppose, departments of a community, and we meet regularly. So there is a lot of consultation. Things don't happen fast. You have to be connected. You can't decide to change or add a curriculum or add another academy. We can't just decide that. That's got to be done together. And I think the team really works really well, specifically our campus managers. Community members are invited into the campus. They're always welcome. We go to a lot of community meetings. And so the team works hand in hand with those members. And I think that's really, been the success of it. I think more and more, we have to start to look at, yes, there's certain things that we know are working, but what does that look like in different communities? And maybe it's just a little bit different. And I think we have to be open to that. It's very easy to get set in your way of how you do things. And I think we do need to be guided by what's needed. And we've seen that. I mean, we started off with certain programs. We're now being asked, can we do hospitality at more of our campuses? Why is the ICT Academy not at all of them? And that comes from everybody, from the Nduna to the teachers to the young people. So I think it's about talking. And I think it's about sitting together, sitting under a tree and having a conversation and listening. I think we've got to be most important job of us for the next 5 years of all the leadership at GWF is to listen. What do the young people want? Not what we think the young people want. What do they need? And let's support that as best we can.
Welcome back. We've just been talking to Kate Groch of the Good Work Foundation, and now we're going to move on and celebrate an important milestone, or at least a cool milestone in South Africa, the Kruger National Park turning 100 years old. Let's have a round of applause for the Kruger National Park. So, yeah, it came into existence 100 years ago in 1926, and it's still one of the most famous wildlife destinations in the world. It really serves as a symbol of South Africa's national heritage and natural heritage, right? But I want to talk about some of the history of the Kruger Park and the framing of the history of the Kruger Park. But the whole time, I want us to keep in mind that this is a celebration, right? But we are going to point out some holes, man. So the Kruger National Park, its origins can be traced back to 1898, when the area was proclaimed as the Sabi Game Reserve under President Paul Kruger of the South African Republic. And there was some concerns at the time around a rapid decline of wildlife populations due to hunting, habitat destruction. And in 1926, the reserve was officially established as the Kruger National Park. Over the next century, of course, it's grown into a great conservation success. It covers nearly 2 million hectares and it protects hundreds of mammal, bird, and reptile and plant species while contributing significantly to tourism, research, and economic activity. So for this, the park deserves great congratulations, right? But as we celebrate this milestone, it's also important to think a bit critically of the history as it's told. So if you go and you look up Kruger National Park history, it almost reads like, okay, just a brief sentence or two about the pre-colonial or pre-settler history of the area. And then after that, it becomes a story about Paul Kruger declaring it in 1926, or it starts around 89 there. The history starts with the post-settler time, right? But what about before that? And I think, South Africa is reworking our history curriculum, right? That's one of the stories that we've covered on the show quite a while ago. And one of the reasons why South Africa is reworking our history curriculum is because we want to focus more on African history and less on the story of colonialism as defining Africa. So I feel like the history as it's recorded of the Kruger National Park falls into a bit of the same trap. I am not saying that President Paul Kruger and his declaration of the Kruger Park is not important. That's a cool part of the story. Yes, good and well. But what about before that? The simple case that I want to make here is that long before conservation policies were introduced, long before this was declared the Kruger National Park, African societies, Tongas, Vendas, Pedis, Sotos, they had developed relationships with the land. And these relationships with the land are very important for this history. So my one plea, as we're celebrating 100 years of the Kruger Park, is let's dig into the history of before 1926, before 1898. Let's dig into what was going on there with the San peoples. And a little bit of that history is there. It is there. But it's not highlighted quite in the same way as the Kruger Park element, the conservation element is. And, this is important as we're seeking to reclaim our histories as African people, as South African people. But nonetheless, today is about celebration. The Kruger Park marks its centenary. So the challenge is not, or the goal is not just to celebrate the past, but it's also to reimagine the future, right? What is the next 100 years of the Kruger Park going to look like? And to answer questions like that and more, to discuss the legacy of the Kruger Park, I am joined by the head of communication and spokesperson for South African National Parks, Mr. JP Lowe, and he's going to be talking to us in an interview. So please enjoy that one.
I wanted to bring you on today so we can talk a little bit about the Kruger Park. And the Kruger Park is celebrating 100 years, a very long and important history here in South Africa. So first, can we just start with some of your general reflections on this 100-year celebration of the Kruger Park in your capacity as the head of communications and spokesperson for SANParks?
Yes, Seakga, thank you for having us on your platform, and good day to you as well. Look, the Kruger National Park in many ways represents a milestone for conservation in South Africa, because from the years of its formation in before that, there were already moves about setting up some sort of call it conservation area in that part of the world, but the actual proclamation of the park happened in 1926. And when you look at from that time to now, it is about 100 years of, I would say, successful conservation for South Africa. So that's the one point of lessons that we learn from the existence of Kruger. Then we've also been able to make use of tourism as a revenue a creator and a driver to make sure that we're able to fund operations of the sorts of conservation estate. So that's the other good part about the history of Kruger as well. I think we've done really excellent work in the field of science, the kinds of output our scientists have been able to put on the table. But then also there is also, and all of these things are lessons learned, right? So there's another part of lessons learned, which is not that particular glamorous, which is about the fact that when Kruger was established, a number of communities were dispossessed from their land. And we've been dealing currently with sort of like 7 land claims that are affected in this regard as well. So now we are moving into the next 100 years where we've signed what we call a beneficiation scheme with these communities that has very firm commercial and non-commercial commitments about how we will relate differently with the land claimants, in addition to other projects that we do with other communities living adjacent to the park.
I like that you've mentioned that there were people that lived on that land before it was declared as the Kruger National Park, and there is a history of that piece of land that goes even far before it had been established as a Kruger National Park. Particularly in some of the reading I've done, the San people had lived there for a while, and you see rock paintings and things like that that gives evidence of that. So, how important is it to also spotlight that sort of history when we are thinking about the Kruger National Park?
Many people, and it's extremely important. Let me start there first and foremost. But many people like to think of what's referred to as natural heritage when you talk about national parks. So they think about the wildlife. Other people are into birding, bird life in particular. Other people are quite focused on, vegetation, particular trees and that sort of thing would really be quite motivational to them. But there is another aspect that we refer to that's called natural heritage, right? That's called cultural heritage. I beg your pardon. So you have natural heritage, which is what I was talking about now. Then there's what's called cultural heritage. And through many of our national parks, you'll find people's graves there, for example. That shows you that people used to live in these lands for many, many years ago. What you're talking about, the rock paintings as well. There's the Thulamela Heritage Site in the northern parts of Kruger, for example, which tells a very, quite an inspiring story about the kingdoms in the African continent around those days. And it shows you that people used to live there many, many donkey years ago. So part of the things, of course, we want to do as we go into these 100 years is to promote the sorts of like narrative as well, to say national parks are also a place to learn about your history. It goes back all the way up to the Stone Ages. I mean, you're referring to the San communities and even the rock art, for example. So it goes back so many, many years. I mean, if I just had to waiver off Kruger to talk about another park called Golden Gate Highlands National Park, where we have found eggs of dinosaurs and all of this evidence that there used to be dinosaurs in that part of the world. In fact, part of the folklore, when you talk to people local there, they talk about something they call Khodumodumo, which when you look at it, it kind of like refers to this dinosaur. So it tells you that the lands in which national parks are at, in some places we can tell you a history that goes all the way of over 200 years. So yes, all of these are very important and should be elevated, celebrated, and also becomes, part of our own heritage as we own as a people to learn from for future generations.
Yeah, and I mean, we also have to touch on the establishment of the Kruger National Park around 1926, like you've already said. it wasn't completely an inclusionary space for all peoples of South Africa as it is today. So it started out as somewhat of a colonial style reserve, primarily used for European or white leisure hunting. So my question is, over the decades, the many, many decades, what major policy or institutional changes transformed the Kruger National Park from what it was into the more African-led, reserve that we see today?
Mm. It's important to always remember that Kruger National Park it's not some utopian um, um, creation that's on a planet of Mars or wherever you want to think of it as of Venus. It's in South Africa, right? South Africa which itself also is in the African continent. And ours is a continent as well as a country, specifically to South Africa, that has a colonial and apartheid history. And that inevitably would have affected a place like Kruger National Park in terms of its formation, what sort of entry was provided, where accommodation was provided, all of these sorts of things that happen everywhere across South Africa also found their expression in Kruger National Park. But came 1994 and South Africa made a shift to say that apartheid is now being abolished and we want to realize a kind of country where as a people we are united around values of democracy, non-racialism, non-sexism as well. Now, for us, it means that the Constitution itself set the way about what should happen to a place like Kruger National Park. And then there were other legislations that then were put in place. There's environmental legislation that establishes things called NEMPA, the National Environmental Management Protected Areas Act, and legislation like those that establishes some parks and sort of like defines its value architecture, if you like. And then from there, of course, has followed all of the other aspects of, even as an organization, what we've put in place, our employment policies, the sun parks today, South African national parks of today, including the Kruger National Park of today. When you look at the demographics of the staff complement we have, it's very, very different. You have many more Africans, even all the way up to management level. The most senior person responsible for Kruger National Park is an African person, Mr. Oscar Mtimkulu. But also, too, when you look at his management committee, there's quite a nice representation, I think, in that committee, Africans, coloreds, Indians, even white people who are part of his collective. So that's the path we are on at the moment, also in terms of how we want to manage all of these gems of South Africans, that they have to be reflective of the South African populace.
Now that we've spoken a little bit about the history of Kruger Park and how it is interpreted, I want to move on to the relationship that SANParks has formed with neighboring communities around the Kruger Park and around other parks in South Africa, because I think that community relationship is very important. I mean, there's people who live around these SANParks areas. So can you share examples of community partnerships that have impacted lives or livelihoods that stem from our national parks, particularly the Kruger Park?
During the launch of the Kruger National Park Centenary, the event we had on the evening of the 30th of May, the CEO of SANParks, in fact, this was a theme that was running through the speeches delivered by the CEO, the chairperson of our board, the Minister Vali Auka. And essentially the point that we're making is that there is no conservation without inclusivity, right? So if we're going to continue conservation of the past, what's called by people who are in the space, they call it fortress conservation. So if you're going to do that type of conservation that excludes, you are going to perpetually be dealing with problems of poaching. You are perpetually going to deal with problems about people removing your fences. And in fact, you could easily find yourself somewhere down the line becoming irrelevant to society with the kind of like plundering that might happen in your areas of operation. So we are very clear about the fact that inclusion is a must. It's not an optional. It's not a maybe. It's not a perhaps. It's a must that must happen. Having said that, what then happened is that post this 1994 period within SANParks and also strengthened by all of these policies I was referring to you to earlier and the legislation, we then established what's called the socio-economic transformation function in SANParks. We call it SET in abbreviation terms. And this function has a head in SANParks, and that head reports directly to the chief executive officer of SANParks. So we have put it to be that senior within the organization because we see this as quite important. We have all kinds of different projects. We have kids in parks, for example, where we target schools and children from the neighboring communities to come into the national park so that they can learn from conservation, see what it offers. And we'd like to see them being the JP Low of tomorrow. We'd like for them to be the CEO of tomorrow in the spaces, to be the ones, the Oscar Mtimkulu, who manage Kruger National Park. They must be the ones who take forward this legacy into the future. So hence, this very strong effort of reaching out. But there are all kinds of other initiatives that we pursue. We have an agreement currently that's looking around youth development in particular, something we've been discussing with the National Youth Development Agency. We've signed an agreement with Sanlam. Well, this is not just for the communities around Kruger, but also they are seen as targeted beneficiaries, where if you get a contract, a tender from SANParks, most often than not, your SMMEs have a problem about funding of their work. So this arrangement with Sanlam, it allows you to get funded to implement your project. And of course, they have their own arrangements about when SANParks pays you, how the portion of money that it was given to you gets returned back to Sanlam, but then you are able then to continue with your business. Basically an interest-free loan scheme. And I can go on with a number of other things that we do as well. Like I said to you, the staff complement, we've been very biased and clean our head that we are targeting people from our own people from the communities neighboring the parks. So when you walk right through Kruger National Park, you know, the language spoken on the ground by our team is not English or necessarily Afrikaans. You can hear this is the language that's spoken by the people in the community as well. So that's just to give you a dipstick about the extent of various interventions we've made.
Yeah, it sounds like quite a lot of interventions have been made to keep the community included in the running of Kruger National Park. So we are celebrating 100 years, and as we look forward to the next 100 years, briefly, because we are running out of time, I would wonder what are some of the biggest challenges that the Kruger Park faces and SANParks faces, and how are we positioned to address them so we can be celebrating another 200 years down the line?
Well, the and not in any particular order of importance really here, but I think the one thing we need to master more is just how to bring our communities even closer to the work of conservation in Kruger National Park. I said that we signed a beneficiation scheme. That beneficiation scheme has what we call commercial opportunities and non-commercial opportunities. So it means the land claimants, some of them will be able to do businesses within the park. We also will look at skills development interventions over the years that's coming up. We even have given them naming rights as well, where they're able to look at particular parts of the park and propose different type of names that we might have. I mean, there are other things within this beneficiation scheme. So the one challenge will be about taking this agreement and making it real action from the side of SANParks as well as the communities, because also what we try to do is to put in place a mechanism that keeps us both accountable to each other. The other issue is just about funding for these operations, because they all do need money to be able to get going. And, you know, we've been relying quite heavily on tourism. We also collect what we call conservation fees. So when you enter at the gate, we don't call it an entrance fee, it's conservation fees, because those monies are also used to keep the conservation estate of South Africa going. And we are thinking now about, can we get other sources of funding? As you would appreciate, the fiscal, from treasury and also from government. It's becoming increasingly difficult to be able to, assert your right to get a piece of that money, because there's all kinds of pressure on the fiscus from health, from education, and various other things as well. So those would be the type of challenges that I would highlight, bring a stronger sense of community ownership. You want to reach a future where when an elephant or giraffe passes by, a community member doesn't say, there goes an elephant, there goes a giraffe. You want them to say, there goes my elephant, and there goes my giraffe as it's passing by, because they'll be able to see the benefits they get from the existence of this. And of course, like I also said, the second point, the question about revenue generation.
And I mean, I guess we can also go into the areas of climate change and of poaching as well. I know that Sandparks is doing incredibly well as it pertains to poaching, especially some animals. The systems have become so sophisticated, but I am still curious, what is the extent of that problem, despite some of the successes that we've already had in preventing poaching?
No, you're correct. I think also something like poaching is a challenge of the future. I'm just hoping it won't be permanent feature. And I raise the community partnership matter, because I do believe that the more you strengthen that, the more difficult you'll also make it for poachers to be able to thrive in what they are doing. Yes, we have had, in particular, something like rhino poaching has been a problem, right? So when I look at the numbers over a longer period of time, it tells me that the interventions we've been making is somewhat working. One is that we've been investing quite a bit in technology as well, and trying to put in place all kinds of technology infrastructure. And we have a multi-year program that's we are implementing. That's an investment in technology in particular. On the side of climate change, earlier this year, there were all these floods around January 2026 in particular, that really had quite an impact on our infrastructure. And part of what we've been trying to lobby for funding is to get what we call climate resilient infrastructure. Because what it's showing us now is that these floods are seeming to happen a little bit much more frequent compared to when looked at over the past years as well. So climate change is certainly something that's top of our mind as well, as how do we now build better into the future as to be able to be but much more climate resilient.
All right, that brings us to the end of our program for today. We started out speaking about the diplomatic situation, the war situation in Lebanon and Iran, and this latest row going on in the Middle East. And I think the big message here is for everyone to be careful there when dealing with Israel and the United States. They've proven themselves on multiple occasions to be nefarious actors. And even in these negotiations that are happening now, negotiations about bringing peace in Lebanon, about Israel no longer attacking Lebanon, negotiations between Iran and the United States to end that war. Amid all of these negotiations, be incredibly careful. Incredibly careful. Then we moved on to talking about the education system in South Africa and how the Good Work Foundation is helping to address some of the problems of educational inequality, helping to bridge the gap of educational inequality in South Africa. And then finally, we have celebrated the 100-year anniversary of the Kruger National Park, noting that while its history, as it is currently recorded, is somewhat lacking in some ways, but also looking forward to the next 100 years of the Kruger National Park, one of the most important nature reserves in the whole world, in my opinion. That has been our show for today. I have been Seakga Tladi, and I am out of here.